pair of sunglasses and a rogue computer in your spot,
Okay.
I bet people think it's you or yours because they see it in your spot and they're going to hear your voice. They're going to say, "Oh, I wonder if those sunglasses are Brett's."
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not going to tell them any different either.
All right.
All right. You ready?
Sure.
Here we go. Welcome into the Psych with Mike Library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan. I'm here, as always, with my good friend and co-host, Mr. Brett Newcomb.
And I'm always happy to be here.
Well, that's wonderful. So I called you with an idea, and I don't know if you thought this was preposterous or not, but so first off,
Well, I often think that your ideas are. So
Yes.
we can begin with that premise.
But how often do you listen to the stuff we do?
Oh, I listen to it every week.
Okay, I don't. Full disclosure, for people who don't know, what's different about you and I is every single word that they've ever heard from either one of us was first take. We've
Okay.
never scripted anything, and we've
Right.
never retaken anything. So
Right.
we don't edit this. We post it as it happens in real time between the two of us. I just think that's remarkable.
Well, we don't do that. You do all that. I
Well,
just bloviate.
But it's
On demand.
it's not on. It's not scripted.
No, it's
And
not
I mean,
scripted.
so so many shows, podcasts today are, whether people know it or not, are heavily edited, even highly polished, and we don't do that.
Right.
And
So whatever polish there is, it's just natural polish.
it's just natural. It's just natural from
It just
wiping
gleams with a shine.
wiping
That's-
pledge on it. Yep,
Yeah.
that's it.
Okay.
So I ask you to listen to our first podcast because, for whatever reason, I had recently gone back and listened to that, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" First off, it sounds horrible.
That's your opinion.
Okay, I think the sound quality. So for people who don't know, the first one
You're
we
talking about
did.
the technical quality.
I'm just talking about the
your
sound.
skill set
No,
advancing
no.
over.
The ideas are great.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think the ideas are as relevant today as they ever were, but the sound quality, we were doing this not in the Psych with Mike library, but at the Psych with Mike office with one mic. So to make sure we're not leaning in for a kiss, we were going backwards, trying to get our airtime,
Yeah.
and the sound reproduction is just really bad. But no, the ideas are great. I mean, I think the ideas this was 2.5 years ago, and I think you could listen to it today. You're going to listen to it today, and it's just as relevant as ever. It's just harder to hear because the sound is bad.
I didn't see that or hear that when I listened to it.
Well, maybe I'm being overly harsh.
I think perhaps you are.
But anyway, so this is, for better or for worse, the first podcast that we did. And after you guys take a listen to this, Brett and I will be back and we will talk a little bit about our thoughts.
Okay.
Welcome into the Psych with Mike studios for this first ever Psych with Mike podcast. For those of you who may have already been familiar with Psych with Mike, you know who we are and what we do. For anybody who may not be familiar with the show, Psych with Mike was a project that originally started as a radio show in January of 2017. And we were on the air in St. Louis, Missouri for the entire year of 2017. But at the end of that year, my sister-in-law had a stroke. And at that point, it became difficult for me to continue to do the show and devote the kind of time to it that I wanted. And so we closed it down. And recently, I had the opportunity to have a conversation with a very good friend of mine, Mr. Brett Newcomb, and we had talked about wanting to do a project together for a while, but had never pulled the trigger on that. And so we started talking about what it would be like to put the show back together and doing it ourselves. And it made a lot of sense to use the technology that exists today to revamp the show as a podcast. So I am your host, Dr. Michael Mahan. I have a clinical practice in St. Louis, Missouri, and with me today is Mr. Brett Newcomb.
Hello.
And Brett and I, our history is that Brett was a graduate professor of mine and then a professional mentor and now one of my closest personal friends. And so I appreciate you being willing to do this project with me.
Well, I'm glad to be here, and I think has had considerable interest to us for a long time. We both have been in private practice. We both have done supervision for other therapists. We both have taught courses at universities on how to be a therapist. So the interest and the passion for both of us has been around for a long time. We've just tried to find an organized approach to getting a message out about what therapy is and how to do it well.
And I think also it is fair to say and accurate to say that both of us really, really love the idea of presentation and being able to present a complex idea in a succinct way that other people can understand. Both of us really enjoy the opportunity to get in front of an audience and to give them that information in a way that is meaningful and that they can apply to their lives.
Yeah, I was a teacher for many years before I became a therapist, and it always was a frustration for me to have to, as a requirement for teaching, attend seminars or presentations when we had speakers that weren't very good speakers. The content of their information might have been absolutely fine, but it's just incredibly irritating to be forced to sit and listen to someone that doesn't know how to present.
Right.
So I used to have a regular reaction every August when teachers come back to the school districts to go to work. The school districts have a presenter to sort of get them pumped up for the new year, some new topic, some new trend in education, something that would improve the quality of their performance or their interest or satisfaction in their job. And year after year, the information may have been fine, but the speakers were really bad. And I kept saying, I could do this better. I could do this better. And then, fortunately, I got hired by a couple of school districts to do the beginning of the year presentations for a number of years. And the feedback that I got was that, indeed, I was doing it better, simply because I was a better speaker, not because my information was any better. So that sort of supports the thesis that it's important to be able to present the information for people, and that's what we're trying to do here.
And I think that everybody who would be listening to a show like this would know and have the experience of being in a room and having exactly that happen to them, where the information that somebody was giving them was good, but the presentation was not engaging. And that quality of being engaging is, I don't think, something that can be taught. Now, you may disagree with me, but I think that people who naturally have that talent are probably born. I think it can be honed, but I don't know that it can be taught.
I don't know. I haven't really thought much about that, but I know that when I was in high school, I started taking classes in public speaking and debate, was on the debate team. In college, I took speech classes and was on the debate team. And I did become a public speaker and a presenter. I have done workshops for major corporations. I've done workshops for school districts, classrooms, and think I have become a somewhat competent presenter. So the proof, I guess, is in the pudding, and so people will make their own determination as they listen to what we have to say.
Right, but were you attracted to those opportunities because you innately were a speaker, or were you placed in those opportunities and then taught how to be a speaker? My guess is that you were innately attracted to those things and then your skill was developed, but that if you had not originally been innately attracted, that wouldn't have happened.
That goes back to
Nature
thoughts that I had
nurture.
when I was a child.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as a child growing up, I fell in love with the English language.
Mm-hmm.
English is such a beautiful language, and it's comprehensive and complex, and the rhythms of the spoken word. I used to read out loud a lot. We did a lot of oral things in my classrooms growing up as a kid. We'd had to memorize sections of poetry or plays, and and declaim them, essentially. And we heard it, we paid attention to it, we listened to it. Then when I was younger, I had opportunities to be on radio and television. I had a radio show when I was in college, and hear myself through this medium and get criticized about what I was doing well or not well. So it has always been a fascination how to put ideas together and communicate them in English in ways that impact other people positively.
So that may even be a show for another time, this whole idea of nature versus nurture, and what are the ways in which people develop, and do we develop in a way that is preordained by our genetics, or are we more susceptible to the influence of our environment? But that isn't what we're going to talk about today.
Well, and or how much control we have over that.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is one of the ongoing arguments in our field is how much are you constrained by your genetics, and how much are you constrained by the scripts that were written for you as a child by your environment, by your parents. And I think we both still believe that the scripting process of our childhood lasts us a lifetime. It's very hard to overcome those scripts. I've worked with so many individuals and families over the last 35 years who were stuck in a script that didn't work for their life.
So that is what makes you a professional, is exactly that ability to make that transition, because we went from the nature versus nurture argument to what we wanted to talk about, which is our professional orientations. We wanted to take this first show opportunity to be able to explain to people what our philosophies of psychology are, so that they would understand where we're coming from. So if you had to name most precisely the theoretical orientation that you subscribe to, and we'll explain what it means so people don't have to worry about the jargon, but what would you say that is?
That's a really hard question for me to answer, because it's I've always said I am not as much an academician, even though I taught at the university for over 30 years, as I am a practitioner. And my approach to practice is the importance of attending and creating a safe environment for someone to get in touch with their emotions. So there are different labels that have been applied to that over time, and as I've evolved and learned things. I remember when I was in college and I took courses in abnormal psychology, every single area of abnormal psychology, psychosis or schizophrenia or what have you, that I studied, it would occur to me that either I or somebody in my domain suffered from exactly that. Oh my God, that's my mother, that's my next door neighbor, that's my wife, that could be me.
How many people in graduate school did we see who would, you could tell when you were
see the
lecturing,
lights go off in their head. Oh, wow, that's what it is. Yeah. So, my approach, my terminology has evolved and changed. I guess the closest that it would come to modern terminology would be experiential, because my focus is on watching for the patterns that I see as people do or don't get in touch with their feelings. The nonverbals are really important in getting in touch. I mean, I think there's a bifurcation, a dichotomy between our head and our body. And our bodies are communicating with us all the time. And nonverbally, you cannot not communicate. And so as a trained therapist, you watch for the communication of the body when it's incongruent with the communication of the words. And you start to gently invite people to be aware of exactly that disconnect.
So you've thrown out a lot of concepts,
Yeah.
so let's try and make sure that everybody's on the same page with us. So when you talk about attending
Yes.
and being in a room with another person and creating that safe, emotional, holding environment, that actually is very Carl Rogers and very humanistic. So those qualities were expressed by a man named Carl Rogers in humanistic psychology. And then you apply a lot of those. So even though you wouldn't necessarily consider yourself a
Rogerian?
right,
No, I wouldn't.
Right, but you do use those qualities of what Rogerian psychology talks about, and I want to clear this up so that people who may not have doctoral degrees in psychology, could actually, put labels to these things. They could do their own research. So that's a very Rogerian technique. And then the experiential, that goes more into like existential psychology,
right,
which Irving Yalom or I'm blanking on his name, lived through World War II.
I don't know who you're talking about.
The father of existential psychology in the United States. He lived through World War II, and
I'm thinking Viktor Frankl.
Viktor Frankl.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you knew that?
Yeah.
And so that's that experiential piece. Now, I actually subscribe to a philosophy that a man who was a contemporary of Carl Rogers at the University of Chicago, Heinz Kohut, Heinz like the ketchup, Kohut, K-O-H-U-T.
Oh, I know Kohut, very well.
You introduced me to him.
Yeah.
So when I was in graduate school, I was very, very cognitive behavioral, and you introduced me to the concepts of psychodynamic theory and specifically object relations, and even more specifically Heinz Kohut and self-psychology. And that's all a stratification of similar theories, but more specifically going down into...
So what you're doing is describing a trace chain to go back intellectually to put grounding under what you do every day. But when you're in the room with a client, you aren't thinking any of that terminology or any of that etiology. What you're doing is you're thinking about, what is this client saying? Where are they hurting? How are they hurting? How can I interact with them in a way that helps them find a better path forward?
Right.
And so you're not saying, well, is this a Kohutian intervention or a Rogerian or an Ericksonian intervention?
Right.
We've studied all of those people to learn techniques that we could use, but to incorporate those techniques into our presence with a client who's in pain.
Right.
Or anger or frustration or whatever the emotional condition is.
But we've all, you and I say we all, you and I have had this conversation before, that one of the things that is, I don't want to say infuriating, but frustrating to us is when people that we talk to who are supposed to be professionals say, well, I'm eclectic.
Well, they're causist.
Yeah, and they do a thing, and they say that they do exactly what you do. Well, I don't really think about what I do in therapy. I just kind of do therapy. But if they can't explain what their theoretical orientation is, what their foundation for how they understand human pathology is, then what are they really doing?
They're not thinking very deeply. I remember when I was getting my training 35 years ago, I worked with a guy that had a Gestalt therapy focus. And he was so proud of himself because he would give homework assignments to his patients, some esoteric and exotic kind of thing that would just designed to try to break the rhythm of their daily functioning and survival. But he'd feel very arch when he would say, well, they didn't understand it, but they didn't need to understand it. They'd just go out and do whatever I told them to do. But he had a lot of control issues. He had a lot of ego. He had a lot of power problems. He didn't do really good therapy.
So that was more about him than it was about his client.
Well, I used to have some of his clients come to see me later because they found it not very satisfying or helpful. And so they would come to see me, and one of the first questions they would ask is, do you give homework assignments? And I would say, do you need homework assignments? And if you do, we can make some up. But I don't tend to use them in my work because in my experience, people don't do them. And then they feel anxiety or guilt when they come back to see me the next time because they didn't do what they were supposed to have done.
Right.
And that gets in the way of getting to what the underlying issue in their life is.
Right. Now, as far as just homework as a concept in psychotherapy goes, it isn't about whether they do their homework or not. It's about what they either get out of the experience, or if they don't do it,
or what they can learn about why they avoid it.
Yes,
exactly. What's the resistance here? So then there's a concept in our work called leaning into the resistance, where you and I don't argue with them about them, or shame them, or attack them, or guilt them because they didn't do it, but we say, what's the payoff? I tell my clients all the time, every choice that you make costs something, and every choice that you make pays something. So let's talk about emotional economics. What do you get out of avoiding having this conversation with your wife? Do you get more stress? Do you get more anxiety? Do you get less satisfaction? What do you get if you have the conversation. Maybe you get clarity. You may get a divorce. You may get huge fights. You may get a lot of pain and crying and carrying on. But if you move forward in the ability to communicate honestly, I do marriage counseling and talk to people about my job here is not to make sure that you stay married. My job is to try to make you stay happily married.
Mm-hmm.
And for that to happen, each one of you needs to be self-honest. You can lie to me, you can lie to the other, but you have to be honest with yourself if you want to make progress here. What do you see in this person that you want, that you like? What are you willing to do to get that in your life and keep it in your life? So you talk about emotional economics.
And one of the primary foundational concepts that I am focused on when I do therapy, and we were talking about this on the drive over to the studio this morning, is emotional regulation. And the idea for me in that is that all of us learn our emotional regulation in the first 18 to 24 months of life. So before we're pre-verbal.
Even before we have scripts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We learn through modeling. So we have this idealized exterior object. So the parent, the idealized other. You're laughing, but...
I'm laughing because I've heard your son call you his idealized
Yes.
external object.
Yes.
So you talk this way at home.
Yes, I do. And much to the chagrin of my wife and my children. But we develop all of this before we even learn how to talk. And so if we are dependent on the modeled behavior of the parent, the idealized external object, and we introject that, so that's a psychology word for, we take that into us and we make it our own, and then
Right.
our rules about emotional regulation are dependent on that modeled example. If the modeled example is bad or wrong, then what we carry around with us all of the rest of our lives is bad, wrong, or ineffective.
Well, especially if the parental introject that you make is an angry one.
Mm-hmm.
If you have the anger,
Then you have shame, because that is, I'm always bad.
yes.
So talk to us about the difference
I'm
between
going to
shame
make
and
a
guilt.
mistake. Well, the difference that I try to explain to my patients is that shame is a script that someone else wrote for you to control you, to control your options, your choices, your definition of the experiences that you had. You're bad because you broke my dish. Even though it was an accident, even though maybe you're clumsy, maybe you tripped, maybe somebody scared you, whatever, but you broke my dish and you're bad, and so now you have to suffer. And in anticipation of being bad, people suffer a lot. They tie themselves in knots emotionally,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes them less able to relate or have intimacy, because why would anyone want to be available to me for intimacy if I'm a bad object or
Right.
a bad person? And so
specifically, shame is the script, I am bad. Guilt is the script, I have done something bad.
guilt comes out of a sense of personal integrity.
Mm-hmm.
I feel guilt when I have not done something that I require myself to do. I feel guilt when I have done something that I feel badly about having done. I shoplifted, and then later I feel guilty about that. I have all kinds of rationales for why at that moment I took that, but later I feel really badly about it because I am looking at myself in the mirror. And so guilt is a personal feeling that comes from your sense of personal integrity, your sense of self. Shame is a feeling that comes from a message that you were inculcated or incorporated in from your parental introject.
So we are attending to our clients, we are monitoring the verbal versus nonverbal behavior. So you had talked a little bit about that, and I wanted to go back to something that I was thinking about when you were talking about that, is that most people don't recognize that only 15% of human communication is the spoken word, 85%
Right.
is all the rest of the stuff, the
Right.
nonverbal
Facial
behavior.
expression, tone, gesture,
Right.
posture, yeah.
And yet we live in a society that is predicated
And
on
micro
the idea
gestures.
of texting.
Yeah.
And I have this conversation with my clients all the time. You can't read nonverbal behavior into a text. If you do, that is a projection. That is not about the other person who sent the text, that's about you. And it doesn't matter how many emojis are in a text, that is not a substitute for nonverbal behavior, but people just have such difficulty being able to accept that. They want to believe that they know the emotional intent of the sender.
I just read an article today that was posted from Time Magazine about how people in the world are having less sex than they've ever had. Teenagers, 50% of the teenagers in Japan claim that they're virgins. American teenagers, less than 20% of them are having sex in a year. Married couples are having less and less sex. And one of the explanations, as the article did the research to underpin or justify its conclusions, one of the explanations is the existence of portable technology. People are taking their cell phones and their iPads to bed, and they're laying together alone, interacting with their device instead of with their partner. And that whole thing about what we call mediated communication. We go through an inanimate object, the cell phone, the iPad, what have you, instead of learning to communicate with the person next to us, because 85% of our communication is unavailable. If I can't watch your facial expression, your eyes, your body tension, your smile, the aura that you are communicating to me with, then I miss all of those components in our connection.
And so from my perspective, I have difficulty, I wonder what it means to our society to think in terms of we have more intimate relationships with our devices than we have with other humans. And if that is so, what does that mean for our emotional regulation?
It means we have less of it. I mean, you watch people flood with anger or rage, throw their phones against the wall, punch a wall, drive like idiots, aggressively hostile reactions, in part because they don't have any experience or opportunity, practice in attending to other beings.
And so they are out of practice attending because they don't do it often enough. And then yet they still expect, at least in my experience, they still expect everyone else to be very good at attending to them. And so we have this expectation I see in society where we expect people to accommodate us, but we don't feel like it is important for us to accommodate others.
And that goes back to self-psychology and the messages that you develop about your sense of self as a child. Your need to express yourself and to regulate your emotions is critical. And your success in life will depend a great deal on your ability to do that. So if you just attend to an inanimate object, if you a computer keyboard or a cell phone or an iPad or some other device like that, you're not attending to the people around you, you're in the danger zone. You don't see when there's danger, when there's anger, when there's risk coming your way. And you don't see when there's affection and happiness. You know, you walk into a room and somebody's eyes light up and you know, it's like, hi honey, you're home. Not because they say it, but because you feel it.
Right.
That soothes you or arouses you or energizes you in a way that says, I have value, I have meaning, and we all need that.
So if there was a takeaway message from what we are saying, then would you say that it is to work on, try and hone, practice your own ability to attend to others in your environment and try and recognize their nonverbal behavior and what that nonverbal behavior is saying to you, not just what their spoken messages are?
Absolutely. There's a sweatshirt, a t-shirt, a page of cartoon faces that are identified by emotions. This one's angry, this one's sad, this is disappointed, this is whatever, amused, funny, that I used to hand out to families when they were seeing me for counseling. And I would ask everyone in the family, look at this picture, look at mom, and look at this list of photographs and tell me which one is closest to what she's feeling right now. Mom, don't say anything. Let's all just look at mom and see what we're getting. And then we would discuss it and we would agree on what we thought it was, and then we'd ask mom, is that it? And she'd be like, no way in hell, I'm not.
Right.
I'm not sending those messages.
Right.
Well, she may be the one that's out of sync because maybe she is sending those messages. I remember years ago there was a study that was done in a school district in Chicago with young black teenagers who had teachers that were afraid of them because they were big and they seemed angry and they seemed aggressive, and especially the female teachers were afraid of them. And so as a result, they were getting sent to the office or the dean and suspended from school for all kinds of behaviors. They were enraged about that because they said, I'm not doing those things. So then a teacher got a video camera and filmed them learning how to smile with their eyes and their mouth and their face. And he taught them to say things to the teachers like, that was really helpful. You know, like, I say, I don't understand this math problem. And you explain it to me. They would smile and say, that's really helpful. And within a 9-week quarter, the assessment device that was given to the teachers, tell me about this boy in your class, changed from predominantly negative to predominantly positive. And the only intervention that was done is they were taught to smile and to interact with eye contact and a smiling face and a message of appreciation.
So we're not just saying attend to the other people in your environment and try and pay attention to the nonverbal communication because it's so much more robust, but also to attend to your own nonverbal communication. And is your nonverbal communication actually transmitting the message that you intend? Yeah, because if somebody says, well, you look angry, and you say, well, I don't have any sense of being angry, and they say, well, I was sitting here really feeling as if you were angry with me, that's really useful information for you, because then you can go inside and say, am I mad? I mean, again, being honest with yourself, am I mad? Right. And if so, what? And what do I want to do about that? And sometimes you discover that, you were angry and you didn't realize it was leaking out. And you can then say to your child, you're right. I am angry, but please hear me. It's not with you. It's about something that happened at work today. But you're picking up that, and I don't want you to take ownership for it. You haven't done anything wrong. You're not in trouble. Sorry that you experienced it, but it's not about you. And that makes that child feel safe, makes that child feel seen and understood, and it helps you get in touch with what's your issue here, and the nonverbal leakage that we all do that we don't know that we do. Right. And so to wrap up this episode, I think both of us would agree that the things that we are saying are things that we encourage people to try and do. They may find some benefit from these things. They may find that they have difficulty doing it, or they may find that because of the scripting that they received when they were very young, that everything that they are interpreting is backwards and kind of upside down. So we're encouraging people to take some of this information and try and apply it, but if they find that they're still not getting the results that they want, what we're doing is not in any way a substitute for going and finding a professional to sit down with them and get good psychotherapy. Well, yeah, and a good professional will have a way to approach that conversation with you so that it doesn't sound accusatory, it doesn't sound scolding, it doesn't sound angry. One of the things that I learned to do was to offer the hypothetical interpretation. Is it possible? Because I think this is what I'm seeing in your nonverbals, and this is the way I'm interpreting what I think I'm seeing. So can you check it out and let me know, am I seeing it accurately? So then that person is asked to do something that they're not used to doing, which is consider what's going on my screen that the world is seeing. So, yeah. So if you want to interact with the show or you want to have more information from the show, you can find us psychwithmike.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Dr. Michael Mahan, at Psych with Mike. You can find us on Facebook at Psych with Mike. If anybody ever had any questions that they wanted to pose to us, you can get a hold of us through those forums. And we look forward to being in your ears next time. Have a good day. This is Dr. Michael Mahan and Brett Newcomb. We'll talk to you next time. We are back, and so what did you think?
I think it's a good review of a lot of terminology.
Yeah.
And it was the two of us talking about the constructs of being therapists and doing therapy versus the constructs of learning theories about doing things.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you go to college to learn this stuff, you have to learn all these different theoretical orientations, and you have to try to figure out, does that make sense to me, and how do I understand when someone comes into my office and sits down and starts to talk about what's going on in their lives, where the pain is, how they hurt, how do I put that in context so that I have some sense of what it means?
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing that I actually took out of this that I don't know that I took out of the first time we did it is I've always thought of you as an existential psychologist, very much because you're a big fan of Irving Yalom.
Yeah.
And then when in our discussion, I was actually paying attention, and you talk about being an experiential.
So you don't pay attention to me when I talk to you. You just pay attention later.
I'm trying to do me when I'm listening when we're recording this. So, but when I think about it, that makes all the sense in the world. The whole experiential thing, because we talked about you use a lot of Rogerian techniques, but wouldn't consider yourself Rogerian, and because it's all about for you keeping people in that safe holding environment, reflecting to the here and now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's all experiential. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I see it as two different issues or two different processes. One is listening to the person and reflecting back to them how I am experiencing them, what I see in their nonverbals, what I hear in their verbals, how I understand the pattern that they are presenting. And then the other one is I then try to think on a parallel track, how do I understand this? How does it fit with the things that I've been taught about how people behave or communicate or interact? And so it's a two-step reality all at the same time.
And that all made so much more sense to me the second time that I listened to that, or the time that I actually did listen to it. And so again, I don't think that the ideas were bad. I think the ideas were great. I think they're just as relevant today. I wouldn't change, I don't think, a word of how I feel about what psychology is. So I think that the ideas are just as relevant, just as expressive, and just in general good. But the sound quality was just horrible. And I'm not saying there was no bumper music. The sound quality is horrible. Then the next week, I actually moved to the Psych with Mike library. The sound on that gets a little bit better, and then it gradually goes up and up and up. But, again, we record all of this in one shot, one take on a really low-tech soundboard, and are able to produce this in both a video and audio format, get it out every week, and it sounds as good as anything else that's out on the market.
It's totally extemporaneous.
Well, now you're just being mean.
No, I'm serious.
I know.
Just sit down and start talking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's a lot of people that do that.
No, and that's either a good thing or a bad thing.
I think it's because it's hard to do. I don't think there many people could do it. That's what I'm saying. I'm pretty impressed with us, but I don't want to get crazy over the top, right? But I think we do a good thing.
Thank you for listening. And if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.